Okay, so today I'm honored to be joined by a very special guest. This man is the head coach of MMA gym in Las Vegas, Extreme Couture. He's coached multiple UFC champions, most recently Sean Strickland. And MMA Junkie named him the 2020 MMA Coach of the Year, Mr. Eric Nicksick. How you doing?
I'm doing well, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Perfect. Yeah. So to start this, I just want to go like into your early life and talk about how you got into MMA. I know football was a huge part of your life. Your dad was a head coach, even gone to the Southern Nevada Hall of Fame. You played at Green Valley. I'm also from Henderson, so familiar with all that. So how did that just go? Because you were an all-state wide receiver, and then now you're one of the best MMA coaches in the UFC. So how did that transition happen?
Yeah, it was kind of a funky path for me, Like I was always involved in MMA in the regards of like I was a big fan of the sport. In 1993, I had all the VHS tapes, trying all the moves on all my friends, and super aggressive kid like that. But out here there was never an opportunity to like go to an actual MMA gym. Those didn't exist back then. There was a couple Brazilian jiu-jitsu schools that would pop up here and there, but for you to get any like actual training was very, very rare back in like 93, 94,
Right,
So
right.
I think later on, I can't remember what year, but I'd say probably like 98, maybe 99, maybe even the early 2000s. I'd have to check and see. But John Lewis opened up JSEC gym
Mhm.
off of Valley View. Went there a couple times. I believe I just started college. I was at Dixie, and then because we're on scholarship, you weren't allowed to do anything like you couldn't do snowboard, you couldn't do this,
Right.
you couldn't do
Nothing
that.
crazy.
Yeah, nothing crazy. So again, it kind of eluded me, but it always sparked my interest in the martial arts side of things. And it wasn't until I was out of college and back in Vegas, and then I was going to school. We had a guy that I was bartending with. He owned a gym. It was like a Sansu gym, and then but he was also a purple belt under John Jock Machado. And
Okay.
being a Machado at the time, like any purple belt, whatever, he was also showing some good stuff, especially when he didn't know crap about jujitsu,
Right.
and really kind of fell in love with it. And then Randy opened his gym December of 2006. He was getting ready to fight Tim Sylvia, and so a friend of mine heard about him opening a gym, kind of stumbled across it, man. Like we were driving up and down, Valley View, and couldn't find
Right.
this place. And this is before sunset went all the way through, and literally like pulled in. There was no signage. And we're like, I think this is the place. And sure as hell, man, he was in here getting ready for Tim Sylvia. So the gym hadn't been open yet. There's a couple guys in here that were training. They're laying mats down and doing everything else, and they invited us in to come to one of the practices. It was a grappling practice, and then got the crap kicked out of me by Mike Pyle, and
Right.
that
Right.
was really it, man. I never really looked back. So started training with those guys in 2007. I was member number one at Extreme Couture. First year I was here, I got offered a coaching position after the first year, and then started learning and try to understand how I wanted to be involved in the sport. If I wasn't going to fight, what did I want to do? And coaching just kind of opened its doors for me, man. Like it was a weird transition, but it was also a very natural one. I always felt like I'd be coaching at some capacity,
Right.
but I always thought it was going to be football.
Right, yeah. Well, especially since you had two uncles that coached high school, then you had an uncle that coached the NFL. So it was kind of like coaching's in your blood. So hearing you say like you kind of knew you were gonna be a coach, like it's pretty cool. So did you ever work with Randy at all, like in those early first years of joining the gym? Did you see him a lot? And like, what was that like seeing Randy Couture?
Yeah, I saw him a ton. And again, like I was just at the time, I was very much a fly on the wall. Like I didn't know much of anything. I just wanted to learn. So at any capacity that I could be around Randy, it was really just watching him and just watching his work ethic and watching like he's I can equate him as the probably the most ultimate competitor I've ever seen. So back then it was the likes of Forrest Griffin and Vanderlei Silva and Vitor Belfort. All those guys were training at our gym. And, Randy was in here trying to pick the hardest rounds and go with the hardest guys and the toughest guys that were in the room. And, Randy would come in and put a whooping on these guys. And it was such a cool thing to watch, because if you saw Randy, Randy was always in good shape, but he's not an overly huge man. So to see him going and compete at the heavyweight division even, and going out, taking out Tim Sylvia and going in and beat Gabe Gonzaga, and high crotching, Brock Lesnar, it really makes you realize like how good and how strong Randy is. So I was able to be a part of some of his camps as my career went on. It was like Brandon Vera, Mark Coleman, some of those fights he had. I think Nogueira, I can't remember, but Neil Melanson was our coach. So I'd get involved in some of the camps as a body. And again, it was just around surrounding yourself around guys like Randy and his mindset and really his fight IQ. Learning from him was probably one of the biggest reasons why I'm at where I'm at today. You know.
Right. So was there ever a moment where you were like, maybe I can try to do this as a fighter, or was the whole time you were just looking to train and then end up becoming a coach?
Yeah, it never really was like this is what I wanted to do. It definitely came up in occasions, and so I was going to school for the fire department, and then meanwhile, my Annie was pregnant with McKenna, so early on it was like, okay, well this is something I might be interested in doing, and I was offered a fight here or there. I was offered fights, but we didn't have amateur fights back then. It was you just turned pro. And I was offered a fight, and I talked to Annie about it, and she's like, "No," and you're like, "I don't want you. You want you fighting for like $1,000 or $2,000, whatever it was at the time." And it was never like a thing where like this is my dream or this is my passion. I just really enjoyed the sport. I really enjoyed being in the room and the art of learning and training and becoming better. So it wasn't like my dreams were derailed. She probably saved my life by not getting me killed by one of these guys. So with that being said, like Jay Haran was the one that really kind of pushed me in the direction of coaching. He's like, man, I think you have those leadership characteristics about you that I think would be really good for MMA. And if it wasn't for Jay and that conversation, I don't know if I really would have made that path into coaching.
It's super interesting. So now going into your coaching, can you just talk about like what it's like coaching guys like Aljamain Sterling, Paul Felder, Francis Ngannou, Sean Strickland, like just to name a few. The list goes on. It's super impressive. So what's it like coaching guys of that high caliber? Like is the training any different than just like your regular walk-in at the gym? Like how does that go about?
Yeah, so to answer your first part, I feel blessed every day to show up to work. I honestly, God, I kind of make that an exercise in my head. Like when I park my car, I get out of my car, I always tell myself, I don't even say it in my head. I verbalize it. I say, you have the greatest job in the world. Right. And that energizes me with gratitude. The moment I walk into my gym, I'd say, you have the greatest job in the world. Even the days you don't feel like it and you don't feel like you have the greatest job in the world, I try to remind myself because of that. And I always say, like, in this sport, we have get tos and got tos, right? You get to coach Paul Felder, you get to coach Aljamain Sterling, and those are rewards, right? You get to coach these individuals. And then you have the got tos, the ones that are like, oh, I don't really want to go there that day. And the goal is to have more get tos than you have got tos. And right now, my roster is all get tos. It's an honor to get to show up to work and coach these individuals and be a part of their successes, So when it comes to coaching these individuals, I'm very much a chameleon when it comes to styles. I like to try to keep the fighter their brand and who they are and to try to adapt to their style, but all the while try to add new little tools to their toolbox, if you will. So Paul Felder has a particular style that he's already very good at, but where can we help and benefit him? Well, maybe we can defend some takedowns or try to start implementing our own takedown defenses, or maybe add some little things to a striking game that he hasn't been accustomed to. Aljamain, the same thing. How can we make him a better striker? Francis, how can we make him a better wrestler? So just trying to accentuate some of the things that I already do well, but to help them try to grow as mixed martial artists. I think that's where I find myself one of the better coaches in the world, because I'm not trying to adapt my own style on them. I'm trying to make their style better.
Right. So how do you go about making a fighter into what you want him to be, like getting him driven, getting him motivated to come to the gym every day and put in like that extra few steps? Like, do you go about that any certain way, or is it just person on person?
Well, if you don't have self-motivation already at this level, you shouldn't be fighting at this level, right? There's guys I've seen that, their goal was just to make it into the UFC. And a lot of those guys are probably out of the UFC now. Right. And then you get the guys that say, my goal is to get in the UFC, but also I want to be a world champion. Their goals and their motivations and their drive is very, very different than the ones that just want to make it there, So if you're at this level in this sport, I don't have to babysit really any of my fighters anymore. Like in the early years when the guys were just trying to get in or however they wanted to set their career up, you got to stay on them. You got to, hey man, did you do your cardio today? Did you do this today? So now if you're not training at the highest level and putting in that work, to be honest with you, I really don't want to train with you. I don't really want to work with you because I can't want it more than you. And I tell people that all the time, like in our room, I can't want this more than you. And if you don't show me, that work ethic and that drive, then we're just not going to be a match.
Right. No, it makes completely sense. I mean, it works with most aspects in life, So now going on, I want to talk about two main fights that have happened in your career so far. One of the first main notable ones is UFC 259 when you trained Aljamain Sterling for his fight against Peter Yan. So what was that training camp like, working with Aljamain Sterling and a fighter that high of a level? Like, how was that going against someone like Yan? Like, how did you approach that training camp differently than other ones in the past?
It was very fun to work with Aljo because, we sat down and we kind of wrote out like our schedule, the way we're gonna approach everything. We had a lot of film study together. We broke everything down to like the hour, man, and it was actually very professional. It was very fun for me because that's kind of my style as it is anyway, and we gelled, we meshed right away. Obviously the fight was going one particular way, and then Jan started to take over, and then the illegal knee happened. So I always look at it like two different fights for me, because in the first camp with Piotr Jan, Aljamain had a lot of injuries that we had to deal with. So our day-to-days were really set up upon how his injuries were and what kind of practice we can get in that day. Then once, he technically won the belt, but it wasn't a win that no one wanted to see. He went in and had the surgeries done on his neck and then had his arm worked and everything else. Then we were able to get back into camp. And the nice thing was it was almost like a mulligan or a redo. We were able to take all those things that we did in the Jan fight really well, but also look at the things that we didn't do so great and apply those into the second fight in the second camp. And I think that's why you were able to go out and see Aljamain look a lot more dominant and score those takedowns and get that win in the second fight. So he's a consummate professional, and it's a joy to work with a guy like Aljamain. And we've had the 3 fights together. I think it was the 2 Jans and the TJ Dillashaw fight. We worked together quite a bit for. Those camps in particular are always very fun for me, just because you get to put your thinking hat on. You get to try work on new things, but you're also learning from a guy in Aljamain who wasn't my guy to begin with. It was Longo and Sarah's guy, so I was kind of like the third man in the corner. So it was an opportunity for me to be able to learn some new things and some new training aspects that they do over there as well.
Right. So you talked about the illegal knee that happened. The whole MMA community was talking about it. So did you see, like, after that fight, obviously there was a lot of negative comments in the community and like whatnot. Do you feel like that ignited Aljo and you guys in that second camp? Do you feel like it was a really point to, like, we don't want to just win, but we want to dominate the second fight. We want to show that, like, this is our belt?
Oh, hell yeah, I did. I mean, we read all that, man. We felt all that. We got all the negative comments. I had all the negative DMs, and anytime you showed support for your guy, you were part of the problem, or you were getting the clown face emojis, or everybody was talking shit. And hey, it's part of it. It's part of the sport. Like, this is going to be something that's going to happen when you sign up to be at this level, right? You're going to get the negativity. I don't understand a lot of the negativity that Aljamain gets, even to this day. He's one of the best human beings I've ever met. He's always treated everybody fairly. He's always taking care of his coaches and his teammates. Hell, I remember like him coming to the gym and offering to coach practice and help out and mopping the mats and doing all those things when he's fighting for a world title, right? This guy doesn't have this like chip on his shoulder or like he's above everybody else. So, that motivated all of us, and we definitely wanted to go out and prove a point. And getting back in there and going in that second win definitely helped.
Right. And then so what's it like when he won and he's a UFC champion? Like, do you have to step back and say, like, wow, like, I just helped coach the UFC champion? Like, what is that like, one of your first championship fighters like that?
No, I mean, honestly, so the first one, yeah, the first time, I obviously didn't feel anything. It was just like, oh, that sucked. And then, the next fight I had that same month was Francis when he beat Stipe. That felt very different because of my role with Francis. But it had like this kind of like, okay, you check the box and now what's next? That was my mentality. Like, as I know, as difficult it is to win a world title, I understand that. But I think if you also relish in it too long, you forget how you got there. and you just want to kind of celebrate, and guys get hung over on that celebration. And I just was like, hey man, all right, that was cool. Like, what's next? How do we go defend this belt? How do we become better? What are the areas that we need to improve, because the next challenger is going to kind of try to come and exploit those areas. So, give yourself a week to celebrate and have a good time, but it's right back to the drawing board.
Right, so now going into the next fight that I want to talk about that just happened, one of the biggest UFC upsets ever, the Sean Strickland beating Israel Adesanya at UFC 293. So can you just kind of talk to me about that? I have a few questions about this fight because it was just unreal. It wasn't judges helping Sean, nothing. Sean went in there and dominated for 5 rounds. So can you just talk about that? And like, first the camp, like what is that trying to prepare for a fighter like Israel Adesanya? Like, he's so unique and his striking is amazing. So what's that like trying to prepare for a guy like that?
Oh, it's always going to be difficult. Izzy's one of the best martial artists to ever walk this planet. He's unbelievable. And not only that, like, I think each time out, we've seen Israel Adesanya become a better martial artist with his takedowns, with his takedown defense. We saw him take down Alex Pereira. We've seen some of his submission games. And that's just a credit to the camp that he comes from and the coaching that he has. Like, these guys are constantly getting better. Stylistically for us, we understand who our fighter is, and Sean Strickland's a pressure fighter. He's going to get in the kitchen and he's going to try to cook dinner, and that's kind of the mentality that we kept. Now, Sean is a fighter that you can't overcoach him, because if you give him too much information, it actually slows him down. So myself and Danny, we try to give him pertinent information, but in small chunks when it needed to happen. Our job as coaches was to take all the information on board, take everything that we could take on, so we were prepared, but then only give small pieces of information where we saw it, where we needed to be. And a lot of that in the lead up was like, Danny pointed out the check hook. Okay, Izzy will open up wide when he throws his check hook and kind of fade away. Well, we have a clear path to the straight right hand, so if we can time that check hook, we can beat him down the middle. So that was something we worked on quite a bit, and we saw that in the first round that he knocked him down with. The checking of the leg kicks, that was something that we felt was very important for us, because we felt Izzy was going to try to attack the low calf with the kicks and everything else. How do we want to block? How do you want to check? How do you want to counter? So all those little things came into play. And then the cage cutoffs, the cage awareness, controlling that octagon. How do we put him in the corner post, and how do we put him on a flat panel to where we get his legs squared, and how can we attack from there? So, we implemented things in small portions, but we almost went from the most important things that we felt would be as the most relevant, and then break it on down from there. But, we're fortunate to have a particular style of fighter that Sean Strickland is. And, styles make the matchups. And, for us, it was just lean heavy on his style, but give him small pieces of information as we need to see fit.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how you're talking about how you implemented all these game plans and they all came to fruition. Like, everything you mentioned, like, it happened in the fight, and Sean was able to make that happen. So it's really interesting to hear that. And what is it like training a fighter like Sean? Because we've heard him on multiple occasions on the Joe Rogan podcast talk about how he loves training. Like, he breathes, eats, loves going to train. So what's that like, having a fighter that's so over the moon about putting in that hard work every single day?
Oh, I mean, I love it, because what does it do to the rest of the gym and the rest of the team, right? Like, guys see his work ethic, his style, his commitment to sparring and training, and now he's a world champion. So you can easily attest to what he's doing is working, and it's true. He's one of the best teammates you're going to find, and he might be outlandish, he might be say brash, or things that you might not agree with, which half the shit he says I don't agree with myself personally. But with that being said, he's in here right now. He's in here sparring. He doesn't need to be in here sparring. He just won a world title. He could probably take a month off if he wanted to, but he took a week off, and now he's in here helping all of his teammates. He's helping Michelle Pereira get ready for his fight. Kyle's in here getting ready for his fight. All these guys, and it just shows you the type of mentality that he has, because not only does he want his teammates to get better and succeed, because if those guys are getting better, it raises his level as well. So, I couldn't be happier for Sean. He's a great guy to have in the room, but he's also a great friend and a great teammate.
Right. And so was there a moment during the fight where you're like, wow, like this could really happen? Or was that something that had the entire camp, like, we can do this, like Izzy's beatable, like Sean can definitely, he matches up well, like this is something that could really happen?
Yeah, 100%. My mentality the entire time was that. I think people are going to feed off of that. Like, even Danny Davis, like, I was telling him the entire time, I go, you're going to be a world champion coach. I was enforcing that not only into Sean, but our entire coaching staff. Like, hey, you're going to be a world champion. Sean, I kept telling and new. Every time something was over, I'd say and new. After every practice the team had, all right, guys, bring it in. All right, and new on 3, 1, 2, 3, and new. Like I wanted everybody to feel that vibe that, so I truly believed it. Did I know it was going to be a tall task? Yeah, of course. At this level, any of these fights are, and if you overlook them, then yeah, you're probably going to get in trouble. But any fight that we're in, I feel like we have an opportunity to win. I don't care about the odds. I don't care about who we're fighting. I just know what we do in this room. And I told the guys yesterday after we had this one of the hardest practices I've ever ran. Every one of those individuals from the journeyman fighter to the champions in the room, everybody stuck together and hung through it. And those are the kind of practices we instill, because I know when we get in a fight with a guy like Israel Adesanya, we're going to be on top.
Right. No, it's super interesting. So now I have 2 final questions. So one, I know you pay a great deal of attention to body language in your fighters, like during the fight. And then you also feel like one of your best attributes is talking to your fighters and delivering speeches and whatnot in between rounds and advice. So was there anything very important, like in those 5 rounds in that fight, where you felt like you saw something or you said something to him that really got him fired up or kept him going? Because obviously after the first round, huge knockout. So how do you keep a guy motivated throughout the rest of the fight after, like, he got the knockdown but he wasn't able to finish the fight?
Yeah, I think it's a process from practice, even, all the way from sparring rounds until the moment you get in the cage. You're always, putting input or planting seeds and drawing that out and hoping that those seeds will flourish in the right moments. Even during the weight cut, there's times where it sucks and you hate it and this and that, but then you can tap on those little things that you've always been trying to instill in your fighter and to get them through those things. And I remember going after Manel won, going in the back and then seeing like the body language in the back with Sean. He felt like he was a little flat or a little uncertain, and had a pretty big speech with him. Just called him in and called the boys in. It was just, that was the only group left. I mean, we're the main events. There's no one else in the workout room or the training room. And I just told him, I said, look, man, like, I believe in you. I know you can win this fight. I don't care what anybody thinks or says, but all I care about is the 5 of us in this room, and that's all that matters. Like, we're in this together. So let's go out there and let's go do our thing, and Sean looked at me and we have a saying before sparring, we say to the death. And Sean looked at me and goes, to the death, brother, let's go. So, we walked out, and right after the first round, like, I wasn't surprised at all. My energies levels didn't change at all. Once he dropped them, I would be excited if the fight was over, but I had to maintain and keep my cool, because we were close to the end of the round, and there was some pretty pertinent information that I had to get to Sean in the second round, which was, kind of diagnosing some of the setups that Izzy was throwing at him. So I wanted him to know, like, hey, he's trying to set you up for same side head kick. He's trying to do this. He's trying to do that. Because I think if you get lost in that whole like excitement, you're going to lose track of what you're meant to tell your fighter. So that was important for me, and then going into round 3, I think that's when I kind of said, you're watching him. He's a snake charmer, because Izzy kind of skated through that round and Sean let him off the hook. And that's when I jumped in his ass and I just said, hey man, like, we have an opportunity to beat this guy. You're letting him kind of get into this point fest, and we got to get on him. And that was really it, man. I know that fired him up, and we came out and won round 3, we won round 4, and then going into round 5, I just said, hey man, let's put our foot on his throat and let's go get this finish, or let's go get this win, So and yeah, it was cool, man. Like, it's nice when you hear your fighter tell you or tell the media that that they're super motivated by their coach, even when there's times that they don't believe in themselves, but they look over and see me, or they see Danny, or they see their corner and go, that they motivated the hell out of me to go out and get this victory too. So yeah, man, I was very proud of him, and very proud that we helped navigate him through that win.
Yeah, so it kind of set up my last question. Like, what's that moment like when 5 rounds are over, you're waiting to hear Bruce Buffer said who wins, and his hands raised, belts on his waist? Like, what is that feeling as a coach? Like, as we already talked about the MMA community, everyone besides you guys counted him out. Like, no one thought he had a real chance against Israel Adesanya. So what is that moment like? He's the champion. Like, talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's really tough to describe, and I remember telling Danny before the fight, when we were walking out, I told Danny and a couple of the guys in the corner, I said, hey, we're blue corner, so we're going to walk first. I said, I want you guys to, all of you, to take a moment and look at the crowd, look at the faces, feel the energy, feel the vibe, take it all in, because these are the stories that you're going to tell your kids about, and your grandkids about. Don't get in that tunnel vision state yet. You'll have time for that. So take a moment, just through my own experience, and that was something like my dad talked to me about in the first couple of times I cornered. It was like, hey, take a second, take it all in, because you're gonna feel that energy and feel that vibe. And man, it's such a cool feeling. It's very hard to describe, And then the moment, Buffer read and knew, just joy, man, just joy and jubilation, and so much gratitude for the fact that we even had that opportunity, and we were prepared for that opportunity. Every little thing you can imagine, and then the emotions, seeing Sean and just seeing how happy he was, and the one time you kind of seen him become a human being, so it was cool, man. It's very hard to explain, but all the while, like afterwards, even I told Danny and I told the guys, like, I wish I would have celebrated a little bit more when Francis beat Stipe, or when Francis beat Gon, and gone out and spent some time and celebrated. And so we all went to dinner. I took his belt with Danny, and me and Danny hit the town, went to some Irish bar with Sean's belt. And, I made Danny wear the belt in and take pictures and do everything else, because it is an opportunity that you don't want to pass up, because you just never know when you get a chance at it again.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, it's all great. I mean, again, congratulations. Biggest upset in UFC history. It's got to feel good to put that on the belt in your notch, you know what I'm saying? So thank you for taking time and talking to me about everything, and it was great. And yeah, thank you. Again, guys, this is Eric Nicksick, one of the best MMA coaches in the game right now. So thank you.
My pleasure, brother. Thanks for having me on.